Thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people in the room. Thank you so much for coming here today. I'm excited to welcome you to the third day of Peralta Online Equity Conference. Over the last 2 days, we have been listening to wonderful presentations and panels and getting inspired by amazing ideas about equitable practices. We structured this conference based on the components of Peralta Online Equity Training: learn, analyze, and build. On the first day, we all learned from amazing speakers. On the second day, we all analyzed what we learned. And today, on the third day, we're going to build through productive sessions again. But before we do that, we would like to introduce an inspiring leader at the Peralta Community College District, who is already adopting these 3 principles in her leadership role. Dr. Tammeil Gilkerson, who will be giving the closing keynote today, learns by actively listening to the faculty, analyzes what she hears by making informed decisions, and builds by taking actions immediately to make a change. Her bottom-up approach and inclusive mindset creates a ripple effect that makes us feel how we want to make our students feel. So no doubt we will get inspired by her speech, by her wisdom today as well.
I want to echo Didem's sentiments. The Chancellor has only been at Peralta for 4 months, but many of our colleagues have said they feel more energized and hopeful and are attributing that to her leadership. And we talk a lot about how we as individuals can affect change in our classroom, but it's so powerful when a leader is equity-minded as she is, because it leads to expansive change at an institutional level. And Didem and I had to laugh when we were planning this introduction because we were going on and on about Tammeil and our personal experiences with her, how her leadership embodies equity, all that we talk about at the conference. But we're going to stop here because we don't want to take any more of her precious time, the time we have for her. But before she begins, I want to tell you about her background. Dr. Gilkerson has served as Chancellor of Peralta Colleges since January 2024. Previously, she was the president of Evergreen Valley College in San Jose, beginning in 2020. The Chancellor job represents a return to Peralta Colleges, as she was president of Laney College from 2017 to 2020. On behalf of the Community Colleges of California CEOs, she served on the statewide Distance Education and Educational Technology Advisory Committee from 2017 to 2023. In addition to her chief executive roles at Evergreen and Laney, Dr. Gilkerson also held the Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs position at Contra Costa College and acted as the inaugural Diversity, Inclusion, and Innovation Officer for Contra Costa Community College District. In addition, her contributions extend to positions as Vice President of Academic Affairs at San Jose City College and Dean of Counseling and Matriculation at Evergreen Valley. Her journey began as a faculty member in psychology counseling at Chabot College. And now I'd like to invite Chancellor Gilkerson to speak.
Well, thank you so much for the really warm and generous. Oh my gosh, my face just went really big on the screen. So being pinned is not like, yeah. Thank you so much for the really warm introduction. I'm really truly grateful, and such a blessing to be back in this community with folks that I have great affection for in terms of just this process that we have in terms of like learning together. And so good morning, community. Let me first, again, say how honored I am to join you all today. Nearly 750 registrants, right, for this conference. And thank you to those of you who got up this morning to join online in person. And I hear that we have folks from across the United States and internationally joining us. So just thank you for your interest in equity and online teaching and really creating real praxis that makes a difference in the lives of our students and in your relationships with your colleagues. And I want to, especially am grateful to Kevin Kelly and Didem Ekijis, I hope I said it right, for their vision and passion for providing the tools and the space for educators to co-collaborate towards building more equitable online learning spaces, classrooms, and instructional praxis. So just thank you both for years of volunteering, for your time over the last 4 years. Can you believe it's the 4th annual conference, and making this convening happen? And I also want to thank my colegas, my colleagues, and folks that I'm very close to. Want to just say thanks to Chelsea Cohen, who helped organize this year, and Inger Stark, who has helped in previous years, really championing Peralta's equity work and just seeing the vision for this to be shared, statewide and internationally. And the conference today and yesterday and the day before really couldn't have happened without the volunteers and folks who, do this, right? They moderated sessions. So Adoria Williams, Nora Mitchell, Lori Allen Requa, Heather Cisneros, Judy Wong. Just thank you so much for spending your time and, contributing to these last 3 days. And a special thank you also to Tina Vasconcelos, the Associate Vice Chancellor of Educational Services here at the Peralta Community College District, for the support for the effort. And I hear she gave the opening remarks. So pleased to be here and doing this as well. So let me go ahead and share let me go ahead and begin. Let me just share my screen as we get started. Okay. Ooh, let's see. All right. Can all right. Hasn't everybody seen my slides? Okay. So let me just, okay. So first of all, I want to thank, I met with Didem and Chelsea and I was like, gosh, what do I say? Like, I just really don't have a sense of like what would be impactful. And when I looked at, the 3 days and sort of how it built on each other, I was like, oh gosh, how will I bring some inspiration, to the group at the end of what really probably has been an incredible days of learning together. And so last night I had the opportunity to listen to our student voices. And I just want to thank Chelsea for sending it to me late. So I totally scrapped everything I was going to do before. And I really felt like our student voices, and they always do, they speak to me, they tell us, we need to believe students. And so hearing our students say the areas where we at Peralta could actually improve to really made me stop and think about what I feel like the messages and the reminder to myself about the work that I've been involved in the last number of years. So today I'm really going to close by talking about building a sense of belonging and how we can do that as we think forward together. So I just need to frame things always so you know where I come from and like what it is, but I'm so proud to be the Chancellor of the Peralta Community College District, right? This collaborative of 4 colleges, Merritt College, College of Alameda, Berkeley City College, and Laney College, both, in Alameda, California, Oakland, California, and Berkeley, California, right? This collaborative, and I want to just say this, of colleges advancing social and economic transformation for students in the community through what? Right there on the screen, quality education rooted in equity, social justice, environmental sustainability, and partnerships. And for me, a lot of the work that I've done over the last several years has really been about the role of racial equity in the work. I really think of education as liberation. I believe it deeply in my soul. This is why I do this work. And I believe it's liberatory for faculty, classified professionals, and the administrators who do the work as well, if we allow the learning to be recursive for ourselves. And so for me, I need to define racial equity for you all, which is, for me, it's about the process of eliminating these racial disparities and improving outcomes for everyone, right? It is intentionally, and this is what you all are doing, intentionally changing the continual changing of practices by changing policies, practices, systems, right? And the structures that prioritize this measurable change in the lives of people of color. And so we can go and do history lessons, and I've watched other equity conferences. You don't need me to tell you about those things, I don't believe, because you made a choice to be here. But just want to center where we are in terms of my the definition that I use as we go into this conversation. And then also social justice, you know, making a definition of that, which is really this vision and transformation of society to eliminate racial hierarchies, right? And advance that collective liberation I was talking about, where all people have the dignity, resources, power, and self-determination to fully thrive. And so for me, equity is the road to social justice, right? So we use these equity tools to get us to this vision of social justice and liberation in our communities. So advancing racial justice, really, and this is the definitions from Race Forward. And I think it's really, really important to just to throw these up here so that you can see, because I really use this lens as I think about sort of everything that we do in advancing the work that we're doing together. So how do we grow power, right? How do we do this? Education is about growing power, right? Collective power for our students, for our communities to really understand and counter structural racism and really steward these transformational solutions that we could do. You all are doing it together. Our students were teaching these skills. We were trying to transform culture, right? By really introducing narrative and arts and other things, this range of things that you might never hear, right? I've heard so many people say, nobody talked about that in high school. I was just, you know, at a class, at a thing with CEOs, and they said the only thing they ever talked about with AAPIs was about, you know, Japanese internment. There is the diasporic, you know, sort of lived experiences of our communities. We are transforming and harnessing them by introducing these things to our students. You know, I'll note the policy change that I talked about earlier, right? So policies, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in terms of you and your work as a faculty members in the classroom. And what we can do about that decision making that you actually have control over. And then just how do we operationalize these things? How do we operationalize racial equity into our teaching, our practices, the programs and the things and our institutional culture? So let me just double check to see if anybody, all right. So, I mean, we're in an interesting time right now, right? In our country, in the United States and internationally, a lot is going on. And I just want to frame for us what's happening here with this sort of anti-DEI, anti-diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-folks. It is an erasure, right, of the lived experiences of many folks. And we can be on a spectrum about how we feel. This is not to say, any of these things, but when we represent, and 70% of our students are students of color, first generation college students, it's really, really important for me to understand, what messages they're hearing and you're hearing, right, in communities as we're trying to be in sort of collective work together. And so, what really happens is this rapid change really produces anxiety. So there is this change in demographics, there's climate change, there's technological changes. We had a pandemic, right? What's happening with the wars, all these feelings really create increased anxiety in our communities, right? And so then that leads to and adds to this narrative that happens, right? So we see it on the news, we watch it in courtrooms, right? These and it's in the structures of the way that we see these things embedded. And so these things add to all of these pieces. And so the Othering and Belonging Institute, Dr. John Powell and his incredible work really talks about the fact that when we break people, right? When we go to breaking, it creates fear, angering, othering, right? That you can break the bonds with individuals and produce these sort of feelings that happened. But then we have these opportunities where we can bridge, where we can create empathy and compassion and belonging, right? Or that we can do bonding, which would then connect us on similarities and the commonality, the threads of our identity that actually connect us together versus sort of, breaking us apart. And that's a lot of what's happening right now, right? Is this breaking of us apart. And so really we want to move between empathy and compassion and then that bonding piece together. And so want to just offer that belongingness and uncertainty is, Walter and Cohen really talk about this stigmatization that can create global uncertainty about the quality of one's social bonds in academic and professional domains. A state of belongingness and uncertainty, right? So as a consequence, what that really talking about is that there are events that are happening that threaten, people's social connectedness with each other, right? And we saw this post in the pandemic, post-pandemic, and it can happen and have large effects. So it can seem minor to those of us who feel really stable and belonging in groups, but for others, it really, really threatens their social identity. And so these are things that we have to really think about as we're doing the work. So I just want to offer here again, Maslow's hierarchy of need. While there have been studies and updates, Maslow's hierarchy of needs really has been the foundation for psychosocial development and student success for years, right? So we can debate all these things, but really, right, this belief that there is the the physiological needs, right? Do a lot of work around, basic needs and securities among college students today, those safety and personal security needs, but that loving and belonging, right? That esteem, those things really lead to what I call self-actualization or liberation. We can add these things, together. And so it'd be remiss to not sort of center that research has told us, right? That these things, belonging is an important part of being able to learn effectively. And Erickson talks about the psychosocial crises, right? It is this series of things that happen, each of us, right? We've done it, our students are doing it, has to resolve from infancy to old age, these little tiny crises that help us sort of continue in our development. And these transitions, depending on what they can, right, really create confusion for us, where we must really have context in a social setting. So if you're isolated, you're really less able to sort of make those connections and be able to deal with those crises. And this is sort of what we see. And so what we're trying to do is develop this healthy sense of self and personal identity. And if you've ever heard me talk before, I mean, I'm on this journey every single day. So I mean, right? So this isn't, I'm not saying this isn't for anybody else. This is me right here, right? It requires, being someplace among a group of people, being in community with folks. So I think, as I've gone to different roles, it's always been so important to me to stay connected to students and faculty and classified professionals and my colleagues or administrators, because we have to co-create these identities and really understand our own development along the way. And this is sort of what is happening in our classrooms as well. So these are the questions we're fundamentally asking. All of us are asking it. I mean, maybe you aren't asking, I'm asking it. So I'll use an I statement here. But I believe, just in the literature and what we see, these are what our students are talking about. Do I belong? Right? I did my dissertation on, right? Just whether or not you feel a sense of are you here? Are you a learner? Do you have that opportunity? Am I smart enough? I think this every day, right? Oh gosh, they're going to find me out, and does this matter? Why am I learning it? What are we doing? Why are we spending the time, right? So these core questions are questions that are really, really important for us to consider. So I put up this graphic just so that you can see that, at the core for a long time, we've talked about diversity, right? Oh, diversity, multiple identities. We're so diverse. There's lots of different people are identified. And then we've added on and layered on over the years equity, right? Assuring that individuals receive the support they need to perform at their highest level, right? That's what equity is, right? Not, again, that everybody gets the same thing, but equity is really this sort of piece. And then we've layered on inclusion, right? These thoughts, ideas, perspectives. How do individuals understand that they matter? And when you layer on access as well, making sure that physical and psychological obstacles do not prevent, right, participation or achievement is really important. And so at the center of all of that, right, is this belonging. It's the idea that we engage the full potential of individuals and they have the opportunity to thrive, where you feel integrated and your values are seen, right? You're seen in the thing. You belong. And so here is Powell and Dr. Powell. Let me use this is another example. It's another illustration of what exclusion looks like. Inclusion is just this, but belonging is this, you're not into the system, but it is this, beautiful sort of sense of things when you think about belonging. So I think it's important here that belonging and mattering, right, in the literature and in studies has been positively associated with academic success and motivation for a long time. And so, right, I don't need to read all this to you, but there, it is being depended on, being connected to things, right? It matters to people. It's a powerful influence. It's a motivator, right? Like I'm showing up because my family needs me. I'm showing up because I'm doing that. I've heard so many stories of folks, right, who that connectedness to the larger thing makes us move forward. And when students have feel like they belong, they begin to build those social capital, right? That social capital, those informal connections that they need to get the information that they need to be able to be successful. And they're more likely to see the value of required coursework, right? Oh, that makes sense why the instructor, right? We heard our students talking a little bit about that in that session with their voices about like, why am I doing this? I don't understand, right? Making that connection. But the more they feel like they belong in the setting, the more it's going to make the connections for themselves, how that is. And they have a higher chance of success in courses. So for me, it's really more than office hours. So again, I heard our students like, I mean, like I didn't even know I could go ask the question at office hour, right? Like, I just think we just have to sit with what they've told us, right? It is, it's more than recorded lectures, right? And like the notes, and these required interactions. Our students talked about that, right? Like, well, I just like respond back because I got to give this many numbers of like responses in order to like meet what the course wants, right? It is really about intentionally creating a learning environment where everybody feels welcome and supported. And I know that's a lot of work. Like, I don't want to disregard the amount of work and time that takes. But the fact is, if we're about racial equity and social justice and actually getting our students to complete in the ways that they want to, this is the kind of places and spaces that we need to build and be intentional about building that. So I want to offer the Garrison community of inquiry framework here, but I want to say then, this has been predicated on an early Russian psychologist, Vygotsky. I always say that Russian names wrong, so I apologize, who defined really the zone of proximal development, which describes the distance between when a student can understand, right, and achieve on their own, and what they can achieve with the support of an instructor and peers, right? There's a difference between what you can go alone, right? That African proverb, you can either like go alone or go fast and go alone, or, go with groups and be more productive in terms of what we're doing. And so for the past century, educators have really like honed in on this, right? That we are influenced by the proposition that social interaction is critical to learning, right? That's what educators have believed for a long time. And so this zone of proximal development in online learning really implies that providing content for online, for assignments and assessments for students to work through it is enough. It's important to deliver a complete learning experience for them, right? Instead, we must consider like how we integrate peer-to-peer interaction and instructor guidance into activities so that students really reach their full potential. And so after 100 years, right, like Garrison here, you'll see, really believes that taking this framework into this research framework where there are 3 presences. So you see it here. There's the social presence. We must meet the social presence, the ability for, right, our students to identify with the community, the course of study. Why am I studying this? What is it? How do I have a trusting environment? Where does that connect? To that cognitive presence, right? To the extent which they can construct and confirm meaning, right? Like, who wants to sit around and do something meaningless? Right? I mean, so that it helps them like reflect and connect to like this sort of critical inquiry and discourse and thinking things through. And then that teaching presence is the first thing, which is the design and facilitation and direction that you all provide, right, of this process that that needs to happen. And so you're needing to create the educational experience right there in the middle by supporting these 3 presences in your courses. And you can see that that's really what the Peralta Online Equity Rubric has been doing for years, right? Helping provide sort of the pieces and the frames that we really should be considering in that work. And it's built a lot on these kind of theories. So I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know already, but But, you know, much of what the research talks about is offering those coordinated services and support, assessing and addressing the structural barriers that impede students' progress, building self-efficacy from small learning achievements. I always believe this, right? From my psychology background, like make small goals, like you actually begin to see, right? Achieving those in small ways really builds self-confidence, and modeling and actively contributing to the campus and classroom culture, right? How can you build that into your areas? And so I wanted to offer, I'm going to take my face off here so you can see it really quickly, is equity-minded, you know, so higher education institutions were founded, right, and designed to serve, you know, largely white students, particularly those who are male, middle to upper class, heterosexual, able-bodied, Christian, you know, with a few exceptions like our historically Black colleges and universities, right? And despite sort of the diversity of the American college student population, many higher education policies and practices have not been configured to equitably support, affirm, and validate our students, and particularly our diverse students. And so Dr. Estela Ben-Simon and the USC, so the University of Southern California Center for Urban Education, purport that syllabi are like artifacts, right, of practice and can reinforce and reproduce the norms and rules that, you know, are harmful to historically racially minoritized students. And so really faculty have this opportunity to really think even from the beginning by doing a syllabi review to thinking through this. So, and some of the areas in which they have on this rubric of the syllabi review, and I welcome you to look at it, is like, how do you create from the get, right, with your syllabi, a welcoming culture? How do you demystify and communicate, you know, what are policies in a clear and approachable way? Like, I can't understand half of what we write sometimes, you know what I mean? You know, how do you partner and make that scene from the beginning of your syllabus? That's the first document they're going to have, right? Validating and communicating that you believe that they can succeed, right? Sometimes those syllabi are like, if you don't do all this, you're done, right? Versus like, what's the other kind of message? And you can see these other things here that they've called out. So I want to use an example. So this is the equity-minded syllabus review document that you can find on USC's website. I can put links in later for you all if you'd like. But here's an example that we used in a training that I did at Evergreen, which was just an example of something that might be in the beginning of a syllabi, right, to tell students. So as an online community of learners, we bring our best selves. We will work to build, expand, discover new processes of thinking, learning, teaching, and loving. This requires us to engage in material and dialogue with open minds and hearts, even when they differ from our own cultural, ethnic, racial, sexual, and gendered identities, personal beliefs, political positions, ideologies, and experiences. Remember, ideas are up for critique, not people. Speak your truth and hold space to allow others to speak theirs. Your enrollment in this course indicates that you understand this expectation and are committed to maintaining an online space that is respectful, supportive, and inclusive of all people and narratives. So this is just an example, and then, you know, you could read, you can, you know, have them online doing something like this. So here is, you can create that sense of belonging from the beginning, right? As you're starting out your course. So how am I doing? Okay, connecting to the unknown, doing okay? I just want to make sure. So when students come from disadvantaged backgrounds, right, educational backgrounds, or grew up in economic insecurity, we often focus, right, on their deficits and what they don't bring. We hear this in our language, we see it in policies, we, you know, notice it in things, but really, you know, what we're doing is connecting them to the unknown. First, I'm a first generation college student. I didn't know nothing, right? Like folks were helping me along the way. So all students bring something valuable to the environment, right? They're funds of knowledge and skills derived from what they learned in their households, what they're doing in their community. I'm just amazed by what our students are doing. Students learn better when their own experience is linked to what goes on in the classroom, and you just know this, y'all, right? Your brain favors and retains lessons that have some concrete connection that's like emotionally cogent, right? And relevant to you and what's going on. And so this is sort of, again, what we need to be continuing to do in our classroom. So an example really is for each class session. I think part of it is the diversity of our students, right? In terms of age, gender identity, race, ethnicity, and life experiences enriches the class. So you have to help them do this, right? Rather than letting it be static. And students often feel like their ideas and their views about what they're reading, they need to feel like it's valuable and they can contribute positively to the learning environment of everyone in class. And so these are just some ideas that I've used, which is like, how do you sort of, read the assigned chapter and come prepared with one or more of the following, right? So you're giving people lots of ways to intersect, right, from their own fund of knowledge into the classroom. So it could be questions that they have, but an example from their own life, right? A book or article they've read so that they're critically connecting it to something else, right? Related readings or things like that. So finding space for students really to connect with it in a way that makes sense for them. I often got assignments where they were like, oh, Tammeil, write this paragraph. I remember it was in high school, even as a college president, I got assignments and I wrote like a song on Dred Scott, like, and I was playing on my keyboard. And I know the teacher was like, what are you doing? But I'm like, I think better that way, right? So, and it's like I learned the information, but I came at it in a different way. And how do we sort of create that in these, particularly asynchronous online learning spaces, right? Where there isn't oftentimes that like person to person interaction that needs to happen. So here again is relationship building in classes. So right, this decades of research shows us that lecture alone is not ideal for learning, right? Especially, right? And you heard our students talk about it. I mean, our students said, right? Like it's a lot of lecture sometimes. And, there's been a lot of studies. I know one here in 2007 of first-year students who found that certain instructors' association with students' sense of belonging and motivation and achievement, if they were connected to that, encourages student participation and interaction, and that instructor warmth and organization. I just want to be clear here. I've heard this from students all over the place. The class was so unorganized. I didn't know what was going on, right? It didn't make sense how I went into the thing. Having structure and organization really does help calm and help students focus on what it is and what's happening. There was a 2012 study too of instructional practices of 744 instructors at 8 community colleges, and 93% reported lecturing more than half of the class session, almost 53% in all, right? I mean, that's a lot to be doing, right? But in a 2014 study of STEM disciplines showed that students in lecture-only classes, right, were 1.5 times more likely to fail than students in classes with active learning strategies, right? So these are things that we know are good practice. So how do we take this to that online and learning environment? And so here's some ideas again, these grouping, and these things, but I just want to like elevate again, given what our student voices said, this group discussion, grouping students for this semester, having them equally contribute to things, guided inquiry, the structured sort of scaffolding of the delivery of material so it makes sense, it's graduated, it's not all thrown in and they're trying to figure it out. But it's like, how do you sort of collectively, right, have small groups of students solve? And so I want to share, I've had the opportunity, again, I just talked about many of my Peralta colleagues who've been incredible and instrumental in my own growth and development as I think about praxis instructionally. But I had the fortune to work alongside a woman named, really an exceptional faculty member named Bhavna Mishra at Evergreen Valley College. She was a partner in a lot of things. And one example of her work was featured in a practice solutions brief for the USC Race and Equity Center on empowering students to contribute to and grow fields of study rather than simply expecting them to reinforce the status quo, right? And she really models in this brief how faculty can ignite student scholars while embracing academic areas and how they can evolve. And so she's a philosophy faculty member, and she's an online instructor in a lot of ways. And she felt like it was really hard. She could feel like she could create really good online courses, but that this online student collaboration and that kind of work together was the hardest. So she wanted to create a project that was collaborative in nature and would also introduce the fact that there's a dearth of diverse readings, textbooks, and teaching materials in philosophy, right? It is really been mostly European, often male. So the result of her thinking about this was the Broaden and Build project, where groups of students could choose a philosopher and a philosophy topic from a non-European tradition, or a topic from a female philosopher, and create comprehensive learning module and ancillary materials to be used by future, right? So co-creating instructional materials for students. And I got the chance, folks, to go to the student presentations at the end. It was amazing. I really recommend reading this brief. Again, I'll put the link in the chat. But really, there was three core anchors to the work, which is lowering the barrier for diverse curricula, right? Like for the adoption of this, having students really tell us their own stories, right? That they could result in being the teachers. Student-driven content, right? That content driven by students that really, again, right, let them feel a sense of belonging, and then centering students' identities. I said that already. I mean, like, really, really being able to allow them to do, right? Understanding that the field is evolving. And so one of the students said, I really enjoyed the project. I was able to research and learn things I did not expect, and I enjoyed creating the curriculum. It allowed me to more easily remember the content and it felt inspirational. It was a project focused on expanding the culture of philosophy. So they're really, I mean, I was able to see it firsthand. I learned so much too, and she learned so much as a teacher, opening and widening her own self to learning that needed to happen. So here's an example too of values affirmation exercises. So studies have shown, right, that if you do values affirmation interventions have resulted in increased grades in a semester, higher persistence to the next semester, and positive feelings of health and well-being. And so this is an example of an exercise I've done before with faculty staff, right? So you have this huge list of words, of values, it's on a sheet, people could circle. I was going to have you pin them, but I knew we weren't going to have time. But basically, this is the activity here. You circle the 10 list of values you consider to be most important in your life, and then think a bit about them, and then pick 3. And then have students write a letter to other students or to you explaining why they do, right? And what that means. And so you could see in the 2014 study by Cohen and Garcia, when students did this, when stereotypes groups were asked to choose from a list of values, the ones that were most important, they attained significantly higher grades than students in a control group over the next 2 years, showing a 40% reduction in the achievement gap between Black and white students. And there's been similar studies on these things about lessening the gap between these things. And so a similar study where students wrote about values 3 or 4 times, right? So it widened, it was even more helpful if they continued to do it throughout the term. And so I'm almost done here. Don't worry. I think I'm on. So one of the things our students talked about too was this access, right? What they chose courses for low-cost textbooks or no-cost textbooks. And so this has been a passion project of mine over the last number of years, is open educational resources, but actually humanizing curriculum and instruction and really having accessible course materials, because I believe everyone should have access, to high quality educational materials without regard to circumstance. That's a racial equity thing. That's a accessibility piece. And it allows us also to humanize these textbooks that maybe haven't been written or seen forever in a long time. And it helps underscore this commitment that we have to the work. And so we spent I work with a group of faculty, and I'm really, how do I say it? it was such a passion project and labor to like build these faculty learning communities where faculty could create text, large, small text, ancillaries. And so we worked in learning communities of faculty cohorts working on these things. And so this is the first tranche of Evergreen Valley College's text. I'll put that in the comment chats later too, the EVC LibreText Commons. You have to see these texts. I mean, they're pretty life-changing. If you could see what the faculty have created. But I don't know. I mean, like seeing people in the text. And so one student wrote, there was a text that was done on world histories and says, the student said, I just want to take an opportunity and just share my thoughts on the last day of the semester. I know that I pleaded to turn in a few extra assignments, but it's the last thing I could turn in and it's not even finished. Coupled with mental health, I experienced some major burnout towards the last couple weeks of this semester, so I sincerely apologize. I genuinely believed I could do this work for this course since I managed to do 4 other classes besides this and on top of being forced to take a second job to make sure my bank account didn't go negative. I didn't expect this note to turn into a list of reasons why I couldn't keep up with the workload, because that isn't the intention of this note to you. The intention of this is to simply say thank you for introducing me to some really astounding artists that are outside of the mainstream attention. Your textbook exposed me to some awesome BIPOC, queer folks and women artists that I don't think I would have been introduced to in another class setting, or at least to the amount of people you put into your work. Whatever grade I receive from you, I humbly accept, but taking your course has me inspired to create art again as well. I'm one of those students that really enjoys learning about the social structures and relations in any topic. And one thing I've learned is that anyone can create art regardless. Anyone can create art regardless of who they are or where they come from. There are plenty of people who create art who have their lives perfect, but there are also so many underrepresented people who are fantastic pieces of art. Life on Earth recently has been beyond difficult, and some days are harder than others, but my potential is wasted if I wait for the perfect timing to create. So again, thank you for exposing me to many different cultures and backgrounds through the lens of modern art. And so I end with this quote from the amazing Beverly Daniel Tatum. Many white people experience themselves as powerless, even in the face of privilege. But the fact is that we all have a sphere of influence. The task for each of us, white and of color, is to identify that our own sphere of influence is, however large or small, and how to consider how it might be used to interrupt the cycle of racism. And so I just want to thank you again for being here, for taking the time to care about co-collaborating, co-learning, and really improving the spaces in which you learn and your students learn. And that may we all understand that we all have such tremendous spheres of influence to exact the change we want in our community. So thank you again for having me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gilkerson. You did such an amazing job bringing together so many of the themes we've seen throughout this conference. By focusing on belonging, you drew a through line that touches on so many key points that have emerged this week. So the opening featured session on Monday described humanizing online courses at scale with a heavy emphasis on belonging. You referred multiple times to what the Peralta student panelists described about their experiences yesterday and how we have work to do to increase student sense of belonging. And so many of our sessions have contributed ideas that you assembled in just a thoughtful, intentional way. You also asked a question that recalls the origin of the Peralta Equity Initiative. When we wrote the first ever distance education plan for the district, it was important to recognize 2 core values, the learners and equity. And like you, we asked ourselves, how do we operationalize equity and racial equity in particular? And so it's heartening to hear you repeat that question. We're not done yet. And as you stated, equity is the road to social justice, and we are privileged to be walking on that road with you. I'm so grateful for your time and your contributions to this conference. To the global participants in the room, we hope this conference embodies that move toward bridging and bonding that Dr. Gilkerson mentioned. Our goal has been to create an environment where everyone feels welcome and supported, able to speak their truth, and hope that you'll let us know how we can improve. So with that, I'll open it to Didem and Chelsea to see if there's any last thoughts before we get ready for our next session.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Gilkerson. It was, again, as usual, it was such a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you making that connection with the students' responses in yesterday's panel, and also overall, they're highlighting what they need and what we can do to make them achieve. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Have a great rest of the conference today. Good ending. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. We do have another session at 10 a.m. I need to look at what's the title of the session. Could someone help me?
Equitable grading strategies
Yeah.
from Nicole Messier from University of Illinois, Chicago. So go grab some coffee if you're on the West Coast, or get some lunch if you're on the East Coast. And if you're out in Europe, it's maybe time to go to the pub, but you can bring your phone and put it on the table next to your pint of Guinness. So we'll see everybody in about 10 minutes.
Thank you again, Chancellor Gilkerson. Thanks so much for being here.